Hello and welcome to Lecture 2 of Lesson 21. So we are continuing the story with Marcus Tullius Cicero being consul in the year 63 BCE, and this is the year in which he faces the conspiracy. What you will need for this second lecture is the book, which you should open to page 59, as well as the handout, the same one we used for the previous lecture, Cicero Worksheet 2. So here we are in 63, a year in which Cicero was successful for the consulship. And there was another candidate in that same year for the year 63, and that was Catiline. And Catiline was a figure who has a very different background from Cicero. He came from a patrician family, unlike Cicero, who you recall was a new man. And he slowly started to rise through the ranks of how usually senatorial children grow up and then start to take on offices. And so in 63 he was praetor, and in 65 he was thinking about standing for the consular elections but was not allowed, and there were all kinds of talks about that maybe he tried to murder plot. Anyway, in 63, again he wanted to be consul, but Cicero succeeded. And so again, later in 63, he tried to campaign for consulship to become consul for the year 62. Remember that the elections are usually in the fall before somebody is to take office January 1st, similarly to the United States. So 63, in the year 63, like to become consul for the next year, and Cicero is the current consul, and the two of them really do not like each other. So let us take a quick look at some of the rhetoric that Cicero used in this year to describe Catiline. Now, be mindful that when Cicero is talking, it's like listening to MSNBC talk about President Trump or Fox News on President Obama, so this is obviously not a favorable representation. But this is what he had to say. And again, you can find some of these texts on page 60 in the reader. So he uses the description in the first passage on this slide or on page 60 when he says, "Now you remember the occasion when the words of that wicked gladiator, that is Catiline, became publicly known, words which it was said he had spoken at a meeting in his own home. No trustworthy champion, he said, of the poor could be found unless he were himself poor." And so what's interesting about this passage is, first of all, he calls Catiline a wicked gladiator, which might sound funny at the first hearing. However, being a gladiator is something that's a very negative connotation. This is someone like a Spartacus or someone else who is really not of high rank. And for someone like Catiline, who came from a patrician family, this is really putting him down. Even more interestingly, Cicero is trying to represent Catiline's program as if he is trying to stand up for the poor people. And given that, Cicero here is trying to appeal to the senatorial public, we can sort of suspect that this would not be something that they would feel sort of very charitable towards. And there was even a much nicer sort of visual image describing what Catiline supposedly said. And notice, by the way, how he is saying these things in private. So it's essentially we like bugged his house or somebody reported this. These were not public statements even on Cicero's account. But in the second passage, this is what Cicero has to say. For Catiline then said that the republic had two bodies, one feeble with a weak head, the other strong but without a head. If the latter were to be worthy of him, it would never lack a leader while he was alive. The crowded Senate groaned, but did not, however, pass a decree of sufficient severity to match his outrageous remarks. So what's happening in this passage is that Catiline supposedly makes this very visual statement, says the current state is feeble and has a weak head. Well, that doesn't sound very promising. The other has a strong body. So these would be all the good people supposedly in Rome, who, however, like a leader, and he would like to be the leader of this other group. And so on Cicero's representation, this really sounds like creating an alternative state or really creating a revolution. And on Cicero's representation, again, we hear that the Senate is groaning, so clearly the response is not positive from the Senate to these reports. However, as Cicero says, they do not pass a decree of sufficient severity to match this situation. Now, what does Cicero want to get? What is this decree that he wants? Of course, it's the ultimate decree of the Senate, and that's what he is hoping for. Now, we don't know exactly what Catiline really said in front of his supporters, because we only have Cicero's depiction. However, we do have some of these depictions, and one thing that's sort of interesting to notice, and you can start to look at this passage on page 62, when he describes Catiline's supporter in a bunch of categories, some of whom are, the first category, men who have estates, but the second category has debt. The third category maybe doesn't have so much debt problems, but they do have, some political ambitions, or somehow showing off their wealth, but maybe don't have the right offices to match. The fourth category is another group of people who have long-standing debt, and this is sort of the first part. And it seems that essentially Catiline is trying to create a coalition of people who are currently not in political power, and quite a few of them also are weighed down by debt, right? And of course, redistribution of debt is tantamount to political revolution, so that would be a problem for senators. The final two categories, the fifth and then the final category, the sixth or final category, gets to what we can call character assassinations. So what happens here? Fifth category, killers and assassins, criminals, right? So this is sort of people who believe that you can be characterized by the company you keep. So if you say someone is hanging out with criminals, by definition, he should be a criminal. The last is also super interesting, because this is now going after not just sort of legal crime, but maybe morally held values. And so in this final category, Catiline is described as in the company of gamblers, adulterers, and homosexuals and perverts. And I think one thing that may be worth pointing out about this passage is that sort of homosexuals, what does that mean in the ancient world? And quite a few people today would argue that there is no such thing as homosexuality in the ancient world, as it was accepted for men to have sex with other men to an extent that maybe it is not necessarily in societies, say, of medieval or early modern times. And so what maybe we should be thinking about, these are men who have sex with men, who might take sort of the sort of that position that we identified as sort of being the bottom, or being penetrated, which is what for Romans to accept. So Catiline's political program, to the extent we can trust Cicero, on the people who want political power and maybe have some means, some who want power but maybe do not have the means, and then lots of people who like to see accept money as sort of morally questionable. Now the big guns come out finally. Cicero gets what he wants. The timeline is not absolutely clear, but I think the ultimate decree of the Senate is passed. Now, what leads to this moment is that Catiline tries to send for the election, and first they postpone it, and then they actually win the election. And Cicero is wearing like body armor before he, which is very, very unusual in the Senate. So the tensions are really in the air, and most importantly, for the year 62. And so there is a revolt by Gaius Mallius in Etruria, who is an associate of Catiline. And to this open revolt, Italy passed the ultimate decree. And so at this point, sort of a lot hinges on actually trying to get rid of Cicero, who is very much against obviously Catiline and his associates, and supposedly on November 6, Catiline and his associates make a plan to assassinate Cicero. And the way we learn about all of this is that the next day there is a meeting in the Senate, and this is a very famous representation of the Senate meeting, which is on the cover of your book and is often depicted. It's a much later representation. If you look at this image, because nobody wants to sit next to him, and that would be Catiline, and he doesn't look very promising, but all the other side, and supposedly we have the guy who is talking. And as we start looking at this speech, some of the questions we want to ask is what kind of piece is this? And in particular, I want to call your attention in which we distinguish between three ways of a speech making sort of a rhetorical message heard by appealing to, on the top, to the values of the speaker, so that would be ethos, values of the audience, or its message. So ethos, pathos, logos are the three parts. I think sometimes they can be a little bit hard to tell apart, but nevertheless, those are the three parts. So it is with that in mind that we can now look at sort of the speech itself. So number 7, meeting of the Senate, when Cicero pronounces the famous words, "How much longer, Catiline, are you going to exploit our patience? Do you not realize that your friends are wrong? Do you not see that your conspiracy is contained, since all here know about it? Immortal gods, are in the world. Here, conscript fathers, here among our numbers, in this most august and important council in the world, there are men planning the death of us all, the destruction of the city and of the whole world as well." Let's just stop there for a moment, because you can see how Cicero here says this place, the Senate, so that's the us, that's the we, against which sort of they are standing up in terms of, this is us, the senators, who are one side, and then Catiline would be the other side. And then we get a description of what Catiline was supposedly doing the night before at the house of Lyca. You allocated the parts of Italy, you decided where you wanted each person to go, you picked those to leave behind in Rome, those lead forth with you, you arranged the areas of the city for burning, you confirmed that you yourself were about to depart, and you said you had to delay a little longer because I was still alive, so the plan was that 2 Roman knights, 2 Roman equites would kill me in bed before dawn. You can see how Cicero is pushing essentially that his own killing is not just, getting rid of Cicero, who you might, different senators might like or not like him, but it would essentially also lead to a major upheaval in the current government, right? Allocating parts of Italy suggests that, people would take over those parts. So it's really sort of a civil war situation arising. And we will catch up in lecture 3.